Computer.
Yeah.
Hello, I am Dr. Rob Francis and I'm joined by Dr. Kerry Hadley-Pryce. This is
Hello.
the second of the Ripplebed podcast. So we're coming at you from creative and professional writing at the University of Wolverhampton to talk to you about all things creativity, writing, craft, tradition, all of these cool things.
Yeah.
Last time we spoke with you, we were talking about why we should bother studying creative writing, whether we can teach creative writing, and what we get from it
Yeah.
uh, outside of a story or a poem. And I really enjoyed that conversation, Kerry.
Yeah, it was great, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about this time round?
We are talking about place and place writing. This is,
Excellent.
of course, something that you and I are very fond of. Very so keen, in fact, that our own doctoral study is more or less about place and place writing. So it's something that both of us are really very keen to talk about. And of course, both of us are Black country folks, are we?
We am.
Um, and um, and when I think about place and I think about place writing, um, of course, I think about the Black Country because that's where I'm from. That's my experience of growing up, and my experience of living. Most of my living has taken place. I've moved away and then come back. Um, but it's interesting, isn't it, that this element of home and this element of place attachment, which is what I think we both got, has fed itself into our creativity and the way that we've explored our own feelings about place and sort of used it as uh, more than just a prompt, but used whatever it is that sort of circulates within us to produce our writing. Because I think both in both of our cases, our creative writing is quite heavily burdened with place, and especially the Black Country. Your novels, for instance, are well in the very core of the Black Country themselves, aren't they?
Mhm.
Um, and my first novel was actually called The Black Country, so go figure. And this sort of element of what place is, what place means to people, is something that is a fascinating area of study. And of course, it is one of the modules that we have on our course, or
Absolutely. Yeah.
at least we did have. I don't know if we
I mean,
still
we
got.
spend a lot of time considering the way that place might influence writing and the way, or the way the place might help writers into a story or help writers into a poem,
Mm,
and that it can be used. I mean, I often use a kind of analogy of compost, really.
same. Yeah.
That starting with place in your writing is a really fruitful yield, at least for
Mm,
me, rather than worrying about character and plot and
yeah.
genre and things like this. I'd rather spend time, and it's much more amusing to me. I don't mean that in a funny way. I mean it entertain enthuses me
Mm,
to spend time thinking about place to begin with,
yeah.
and then from that a certain atmosphere or mood is generated. And then
Yeah.
from that, I can start thinking, right, who are the people that need to populate this sort of mood and this sort of cartography?
Yeah.
And then from there comes
Yeah.
a particular story or plot point that can
Yeah.
kind of anchor those things as well. Uh,
Yeah.
and I think it one of the reasons that then become one of the reasons I think that is a really useful tool for writers, not just that it's fun, uh, and allows kind of vivid descriptions and imagery, and symbol to come to life in a very
Mm,
concrete way, is that every kind of creative decision that you make around character, plot, speech, and whatever becomes harnessed to a very,
mm,
very particular locality
yeah.
as well. which then produces a particular pattern of authenticity to it. I mean, even if you're writing speculative fiction or whatever, it still maintains that kind of pattern of authenticity.
Yeah.
And there's a sense, I think, in both of our writing and other great place writers as well. And it might be nice to talk about some of the writers that we like as
Yeah, sure.
during this conversation. Is that it's as if, well, first of all, you're treating setting as more than just a backdrop.
Mm.
It's a crucial influencer on the decisions, the movements, the action, and the expressions of your characters as well, as it is in real life as
Yeah,
well. I mean, you've mentioned the term place attachment.
yeah,
This comes from environmental psychology in the
yeah,
way that we navigate places, we imbibe the different things from those places, and we become attached to them,
yeah,
developing what Harold Brzezinski calls a place identity. And
yeah,
I think if we can start creatively thinking about the way our characters and our land and our settings come together in those very real psychological ways,
yeah.
we we're automatically producing work with layers and complexity and interesting textures and sensory details as well.
Definitely. And I think I'm always what has struck me about, the times that over which I've been teaching creative and professional writing or creative writing, um, when there is a focus on place, I I'm really I've become less surprised about it because it happens more often that people go, "Oh, I hadn't thought about it.
Mm,
I hadn't thought about it." Um, what a lot of people who go into creative writing think about is plot and character
yeah,
first and
and
foremost.
rightly so to some extent.
And
Yeah.
absolutely, when I understand. And for some people, it's a kind of almost like an epiphany. Oh gosh, of course I hadn't thought about it in that way, which and the analogy that I use is, when you go to, for instance, to the theatre or you, well, if particularly the theatre, but films as well.
Mhm.
If there's just a character that stands on a blank stage,
Yeah,
what do you think? You know, what is there? What
right.
else is there? There's
Yeah,
absolutely nothing.
it's
So,
the
so
kind of thing that would work in a sort of abstract Samuel Beckett quick one
precisely.
act play type stuff,
Yeah,
but it's
yeah,
very difficult to hook a reader, to pull a reader
exactly.
into an engrossing and immersive story world.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that the other thing that possibly talking about place as an element of creative writing does is it brings to the fore um, how people feel about who they are because of where they are from.
Mm,
So it takes it into a very kind of therapeutic, almost self-reflective kind of way of thinking about
I
it.
think so, yeah.
Um, I mean, we know, you and I know, coming from the Black Country, people automatically make an assumption. And within the Black Country itself, people make an assumption about which part of the Black Country you happen to be from,
Indeed. Yeah.
and that
If
sort
you've
of
got an 01902 phone number, you're in the black country. Yeah,
no,
that kind of
right? That's
conversation.
that's
Ales
exactly,
Owen
yeah.
ain't, yeah, that
No,
kind of,
it could be.
yeah,
It could be.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think this sort of sense of the construction of real characters, the construction of real people, and the elements of how place and being from a place and being influenced by a particular place has on them personally
Hmm.
is something that, good creative writers or kind of reflective, thoughtful, insightful creative writers begin to think about it from a real life perspective.
Yep, indeed. I think you're
And so,
absolutely right.
certainly from my creative writing practice has always and will always involve um, an exploration of real place, and often these are places that I am familiar with, that this goes back to that kind of, well, we have to mention psychogeography, don't
Mm.
we, in this? It goes back to this sort of psychogeographic, this the French situationists idea of the expression of place within a person, the kind of, the psychology that evolves from being in a place. I mean, they did some particularly um, experimental ways of experiencing place.
Hmm.
And my own personal psychogeography has been experimental in a slightly different way, because what they did is they looked at unfamiliar places, or they made places unfamiliar by walking in peculiar ways. But for my own psychogeographic practice is following the same path again and again, in a repetitive way,
Yes.
in order to experience it differently. This is an effort, but it also kind of links into a lot of creative theory, that talks about um, the sort of neuroscience of creativity, and the way that sense of tapping into a an element of creativity that you wouldn't normally have found by being in place. It's a really quite complex kind of way of thinking about the way that you use your creative writing process.
Mm.
So I think this sort of active aspect of using place, and using places that you might otherwise think of as being very familiar, to prompt your own kind of writing, is definitely something that I have done. Um, and if we look at, and you and I, we've talked and written about this extensively, really. If we look at places like the Black Country, and if we focus on that for this, because we're in the Black Country and the university is the University of the Black Country, um, it is a it is a place that is absolutely ripe with creative compost,
Yeah.
because it is this strange, eerily weird, not one thing, not the other kind of place. Um, and by that, we all know, don't we, that the Black Country was the cradle of the Industrial Revolution. It was extremely um, industrial and built up. But it originally, before that, and these places still do exist, it was sort of farmland,
Yeah. And
and there were
small holdings.
great swathes, exactly, of of moorland, actually.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, and even the kind of the history of pasture farming in particular went right up
yeah,
into right well into the 20th century, really, with the kind of dairy farms in Cateshill in Dudley.
yeah,
I mean, it's
definitely,
strange to think of it now, but
yeah,
you know,
it is,
you walk through the housing estate in Cateshill and past the flats and up to the top
yeah,
of the bank, and there were cows.
yeah. Just there
Yep.
grazing, yeah. And those kinds of patches of green do still exist at the moment, you know. And I think we've got this sort of sense of this uh mixed identity. It's not unsure, it's totally sure of itself. But there is a
Yeah, it's
mix,
sure,
isn't
but
there?
hard to define.
Yeah. And I think it sort of dines out on that.
Hmm.
It says, "Don't try and define me," and these kinds of elements about what place is and where you are, um, is something that requires creative writers to think, rather than to really kind of explore what place is doing to them as they are in it, and what it might do to fictional characters that they create, how it might affect them,
Hmm.
and what this thing might do to the kind of mood and atmosphere of whatever it is they're writing. And we're lucky, aren't we? Because we've got a few writers who are from this neck of the woods, who focused on I suppose parts of the country, parts of the Black Country that are otherwise considered to be a little bit naff,
Yep.
actually.
Well,
Yeah,
either naff or ugly,
yeah,
or
yeah. Kind of
not worth
wanting.
attention at least. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Lacking in inspiration. I mean, of course, there's Anthony Cartwright, isn't there? He's a man from Dudley, and he doesn't live there anymore. He's emigrated somewhere else in the country. But his novels are basically set in Dudley, but in
Yeah.
a kind of a fictional area of Dudley. But that sort of sense of place identity, of of kind of cultural Dudley culture that is very specific to that sort of I want to say claustrophobic. There is a sort of a
Yeah.
claustrophobic
Well,
nature.
Anthony himself refers to it as the hyper local.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely, and that's such a particularly good way of describing what he does. He's very clever with things like using dialect. Um, One or two people talk to me when I talk about place writing and fiction is should they use dialect
Mm.
or not? Um, I think you can overthink that quite a bit, really. But and of course, with the Black Country, for instance, the dialect differs from one street to the next, doesn't it? Or certainly from one town to the next.
Yep, it can
Um,
do.
so you've got to be really careful about sort of the critique that you might get about that sort of phonetic spellings that you're using. But Anthony does it really particularly well. That just dips into very subtly a slightly different pronunciation, and language and linguistics, of course, is also part of place and place identity. So I think. And there are other novels, of course. For instance, Irving Welsh Train Spotting, which are written entirely in.
Yeah,
Uh, uh,
absolutely. Yeah, or
we,
even,
we,
the American writer like Herbert Selby Jr.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. These things absolutely work. And even if you go back to things like, of Mice and Men, where the dialect is, where the dialogue is, some of it is written with that sort of American, sort of Californian twang.
Yeah,
It works particularly well. Um, so place is this sort of underutilized in some ways element of creative writing that um, I suppose for me anyway, I kind of obsess about a little bit. Um, and I think sort of researching and thinking about the way that this this sense of place works on a writer's brain is something that I've been very, very interested in.
it's
Um,
fascinating. It's fascinating. I mean, just when you were talking earlier about your process of going around places that you're very familiar with,
yeah,
uh, I think this is kind of crucial to both of our practices, and probably other, I would probably extend it out to not just Black Country writers. I mean, it's certainly kind of thematic preoccupation of of contemporary Black Country literature. But I think there's something of the post-industrial
oh yeah, yeah,
uh, literature as well. You see similar patterns in, writers from Clydebank or Port
mm.
Talbot or Sheffield or the Isle of Dogs.
Oh yeah, yeah,
There's a similar sort of fascination with that off-kilter landscape and
yeah,
seeing what's in your immediate locale under kind of different lenses as well.
mm. Yeah,
Um, I mean, Charles Forsdick is one critic, and there's a number of others that are really interested in travel and movement and mobility. Tim Creswell is
mm.
another important kind of geographer and
Yeah,
poet in that realm. And these sorts of thinkers kind of refer to what you were just discussing as either micro travel
yeah,
or as vertical travel.
Yeah.
Or at least in that kind of, again, tradition of psychogeography of getting lost or finding new ways of looking and finding new ways of movement so that
Mm.
you can kind of take away the blinkers of the everyday experience and enter something new.
Yeah.
Um, I think that, but there's something really crucial about what happens, and perhaps this is attached to some of your interests in the neurology of the creative act as well.
Yeah.
That, you know, if, I mean, for those that are listening, maybe we could give you a little writing prompt here and just
Mm.
tell you to go for a walk
Mm.
in exactly the same route. It only needs to be a 10-minute stroll,
Mm.
but do the same route every single day for a month.
Yeah.
And what you'll start to notice there is things that have been there all the time, or patterns and shadows and textures and colors, or signs, or
Yeah.
people that you may have only unconsciously noticed or subconsciously noticed or never really paid any attention to. But in
Yeah.
the act of repetitively moving in the
Mm.
same small cyclical motion time and time again, there's a
Yeah.
sense that each time you do it, you're getting a little bit further down, a little
Yeah.
bit further into the layers, a little bit further into what someone like Robert McFarlane would call the palimpsest of place
Yeah. Yeah.
in
For
his
sure.
in his work as well.
Yeah.
And that's what I quite like about this term of vertical travel. That,
Mm.
of course, if you consider horizontal travel as, I've got to go to work, I get in my car, I go from point A to point B. It's practical, it's pragmatic, it's got a purpose to it.
Mm.
And that's kind of anti-creativity, really. There's nothing really
It is.
playful
Yeah.
about that. Whereas the psychogeographers would say, go and get lost, go and drift, go and see
It
what you
would.
can find
Yeah.
and whatnot. And there's a similar sort of ethos, if you like, to vertical travel, where you return to a small journey. And that
Mm.
might be as small in terms of its uh,
Yeah.
uh, distance, in terms of meters and kilometers or whatever, but it might also be small in terms of time length as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
In doing that, you are naturally, I think, opening yourself up to different ways of viewing
Yeah. Yeah.
because you when you travel either without purpose or with an alternative purpose or
Mm.
even with some kind of off kilter playful purpose, you're deliberately you're 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 opening up the senses in new ways, if that makes sense. I don't want to get all
Yeah.
hippie and
No, no.
there's a certain kind of Arthur Rambo uh, unleashing of the senses about this, but there is a certain truth to that, I think,
Yeah,
as well.
definitely.
And then what you can then do on that small journey or that tiny journey is to start cataloging the smells, the textures, the
Yeah.
sights, the
Yeah.
sounds, the things that are out of place, the things that are there all the time, the things that are there
Yeah.
only during spring or only during autumn and all these. And that can then start to pool itself together into what we've referred to as this kind of compost of creativity
Definitely.
as well. But that also mirrors this idea of place identity that we've mentioned
Yeah.
as well. I mean, Harold Prashansky and the environmental psychologists, you know, have been really, really influential and important on my kind of scholarly and creative work
Yeah.
because what they what they allowed me to understand in kind of intellectual terms, I suppose, is that there's more to place than it just being a dot on the map.
Yeah.
And also that there are significance, deep significance to the boring stuff as much as there
Absolutely.
are to the interesting things,
Yeah.
or the cultural or ephemeral things as well.
Mm.
I mean, as
Mm.
creatives, we're always on the hunt for the beautiful sunset, aren't we? Or the
Yeah.
the pastures of wild flowers, or you know,
Yeah.
we're on the hunt for interesting things and curious things. But what can also be found in these kind of micro journeys or vertical travels or these psychogeographic wanderings
Mm.
is the kind of beauty or curiosity or haunting of
Yeah,
the everyday as
yeah.
well. And that's
That's the
what
thing.
environmental psychology has really helped me kind of understand in my own creative work as well. That on one hand, so if you think about place identity as this kind of web of
Mm,
different signs and symbols and ideas that all kind of web together, and every time one thing moves, it moves another, and it
mm.
becomes this kind of dynamic, constantly moving thing
Yeah,
uh, that people bring into themselves, and it mirrors their sense of self, and it upholds their sense of self as well. That's what
yeah,
Jansky thought of as kind of place identity.
yeah,
And so, in
yeah.
some sense, you know, I live in Brierley Hill, so
Mm,
what's really important about Brierley Hill? Well, we're famous for being glass makers. We're famous for being brick makers. We've got beautiful, lush nature reserves, but there's also kind of old industrial estates and
yeah,
housing estates. There's things that are kind of down at heel that need improving. There's things that
mm,
are vibrant and bright and almost overly sanitized in a kind of hyper modern way in terms
yeah,
of shopping centres and whatever. So
yeah,
already within like 30 seconds, I've told you some really interesting things, some really boring things, but I'm painting a picture of this dynamic, unusual kind of
yeah,
kilter space as well. And that, again, I think is part of what's
yeah. I
playing
think
out
so.
in with creatives that pay acute attention to their immediate localities.
Mm,
And something that you've spoken and written about quite a lot as well in terms of the infraordinary. Was it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The ordinary, yes, absolutely. And this is about people like Tim Edensaw, for example, and Les Roberts. They
Yes.
do a lot of work up north, Sheffield and Manchester, particularly looking at the 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 ordinary that has become the infraordinary. And these are like places that I think Tim Edensaw is particularly interested in industrial ruins. These are these are in places up north that have been
Mm.
industrial places, factories that have closed down and they've just been left. The sort of skeleton of buildings is still there, but there's no workings going on the inside. So one of the things that Edensaw did was he's written extensively about industrial ruins by in quotation, I'm putting it in quotation marks, exploring them as if it's like the Alps or something, but exploring them as ruins of the ordinary,
Yes.
and looking at them as places that housed and provided work for, and therefore money and economic value to a place no more. And there is a lot of work that he's done about the exploration of the sense of them still being there, the sense of atmosphere and sounds, smells, all of that sensory stuff that is really important about their continuing existence, which is absolutely fascinating, and has kind of prompted within him and within others, because even if you read these academic papers that he's written and chapters, they're inspirational in the way that they write.
Mm.
Um, there's also Les Roberts, who did something really interesting because I think he's at Sheffield, or he was in Sheffield University, and he had to drive on a motorway, I think with the M62 or something, every day. And every day he went past a traffic island that was in the middle, uh, where the motorways kind of split off into different places.
Hmm.
And he drove past it every day and thought, I wonder what it's like to be on that bit of patch of land, which which he could see as he was going past, week on week, on month, the way that nature was sort of taking hold of this place. So he spent a night in there, and recorded the sounds, experienced the smells and the sights, and what kind of wildlife was living there, what kind of things he found there, and this sort of fascination with things that have been left behind that are basically overlooked areas, forgotten,
Hmm.
totally ordinary, that have been made into this kind of infra-ordinary, are
Yeah.
used as
And it's sort of suggesting that, the places that you walk past daily, the places that you take for granted,
yeah,
have the potential to be very, very rich, very, very complex.
yeah,
And that you can reveal things about life, about
yeah,
the social worlds that we live in, and the
mm,
landscapes that we live in by
mm,
paying very close attention. And I think
definitely.
what you've just described there as well with the kind of let's call them the latter
Mm,
psychogeographies, or
mm,
the late 20th century psychogeographers, is, I think, one of the troubles I have with psychogeography in its early incarnations
mm.
is that it's a little bit too experimental, a little bit
Oh
too
yeah,
playful. I mean, I heard Will Self describe the situation international as a bunch of pretentious French Marxists. And I think that kind of sums it up. It's
yeah,
certainly got its place and it's got its worth.
yeah,
But I think the pretensions kind of got the better of them a little bit more,
yeah.
a bit too much, and the ideology got a
Oh
bit
yeah,
too much as well. But what you then get in the later psychodrama, when it kind of re-establishes itself in the kind of 90s and early noughties, let's say, with people like Will Self and
mm,
Ian Sinclair,
mm,
is you get a much more deliberate wandering
mm.
as well. And
Yeah,
you get this attention on the overlooked or the undone
yes,
for as well.
yeah. I think that sort of overlooked or forgotten aspect is something that certainly the sort of latter day psychogeographers are
Was
particularly
deep
interested in.
topography what Ian
The
Sinclair
deep
liked it,
topography,
didn't he?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then there is he seems to have disappeared off the scene completely now, but there's a really fascinating and not an academic, just a man called Nick Papadimitriou.
Yes.
Now you can catch up with his wanderings on on YouTube. It's called I think the London
Yeah, there
Perambulator.
was a documentary made about him, wasn't there, called
That's
the
right.
London
With Will
Perambulator, which is
Self. That's
brilliant.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think he's with, and Will Self sort of, he's with him. He's a fascinating person for, you can experience it with him if you watch that documentary of him walking from, the escarpment where he lives in a high-rise block or used to, and he's kind of walking. He's a single man. He can do exactly what he wants. But so if he wanted to walk and then just sleep under a hedge, which by the way he did, he could. But he was always fascinated with the most ordinary things. So in that documentary, you'll see him see a clump of concrete. It could have been anything. I don't know what it was. It's when you see a clump of concrete, it's like big thick wire in the middle of it.
Hmm.
Um, he stops and examines this clump of concrete in a kind of a fascinated and fascinating way, sort of considering how it's been left, why it's been left, who put it there, what was its purpose, does it still have a purpose? And so this sort of sense of from a kind of neuroscientific kind of way, um, it's obviously our brains are very complex, and it isn't just about whether it's your left brain or your right brain. There's sort of very, very complicated things going on. But there is an element of our brain that relies on logic, trying to find out facts, trying to find out this plus
Yeah.
that equals
Looking for
this and so on.
patterns.
Yeah, looking for patterns, trying to form formula, that sort of logical
And
aspect
to
of things.
predict from that as well, I suppose, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. For survival, I suppose that comes from.
Mm.
And then there is the sort of other aspect of our brain that where all our memories are stored. All of our dreams spring out from this area. And there is a school of thought that says that if we try to experience place, the ordinary, or the familiar, in any way, if we try to experience it using our logical side, um, this will feed into our dreamlike state. And this will feed into this part that becomes a memory. And it's our memories and our dreams where our creativity comes from. I mean, that's a really basic way
Hmm.
of describing what happens neuroscientifically, but that's it. Those two parts of your brain can't work together. They can't work simultaneously, but they can feed each other. And it's that sort of feeding of each other by, in this case, being in place and deliberately trying to experience it in a new and more experimental way, I suppose.
Yeah.
Um, one of the things that has cropped up fairly recently, actually, about ideas about boredom, um, and boredom really is quite good for creativity.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
I mean,
Because
it's the
it
thing.
allows you to wander in your own brain, doesn't it? And
Exactly that.
you know,
Yeah.
you surprise yourself with the weird and odd thoughts.
That's it. You
Yeah.
allow those thoughts to sort of percolate and ferment,
Hmm.
and then the key is to not let them fly away. Otherwise, somebody else will catch them. You know, you've got to make sure that you harness those sorts of thoughts.
Yeah. And so
Well,
I suppose, I mean, we might be moving into a different podcast here.
we are
We've
kind
definitely
of.
got it on our list
Yeah,
to do a session on neurology and flow states and things. But
yeah,
as
yeah,
we're here,
yeah.
we may as well at least
We can sort
riff
of,
on it
yeah,
for a while.
we can nip into
And I
that.
think
Yeah.
there's two things I want to pull out from what you've just said. Um, the first is the idea of flow states, I suppose,
Mm,
is that boredom is one thing, but you don't want to be too bored. Because if
mm,
you're too bored, you're going to start to switch off and you need to be alert
mm,
to a certain extent.
mm.
Um, and so there's a kind of balance between, uh, and the opposite end of that is that if you are too stimulated
Yeah.
or you put too much pressure, there's
Mm,
too much stress involved in what you're doing,
yeah.
then the communications between that creative parts of the brain and logical parts of the brain aren't effectively
Absolutely.
communicating
Yeah.
with each
Yeah.
other. And so there's a sort of sweet spot that
There
you're
is.
stimulated enough to carry on being interested, to carry on noticing, to
Mm,
hold your attention, but that you're not having to work too hard at it. As,
yeah.
and that's where
Yeah.
you start to enter what's sometimes referred to as a
As
flow
the flow
state,
state, exactly. This
where
is,
kind of
I mean,
creativity and movement and understanding kind of share a space between a kind of logical, rational side of things and an instinctive, gut, imaginal side of
yeah,
things as well. And I think that
yeah.
kind of leads me quite nicely onto the next thing that I wanted to talk about, which
Mm.
is geopoetics
Ah,
as well.
yes.
Because so much of what you've just said about uh, the the crossing points, that's what a geopoetic would uh, geopoet would call it,
Mm,
between the sort of hemispheres of the brain, but also between that pattern making and imaginal part of the
yeah,
brain, is very, very similar to the kind of deliberate practices of geopoetics as well, which
yeah.
is another sort of subcategory, I suppose, of place writing,
It
or at least
is.
place investigation.
Yeah.
Well, as a geopoetic method, you are trying to understand landscape and locality, and place,
Mm,
uh, place and spaces
yeah.
through a kind of meeting of the scientific,
Mm,
rational, logical, with the mystical, the
yeah.
poetic, and the instinctive
Yeah.
as well. And
Yeah.
through that, you start to produce new ways of thinking about the landscape, new
Mm.
ways of navigating and seeing and measuring and thinking it through, and then
Yeah.
finally, new ways of expressing that as well. So, in
Yeah.
some ways, it's about taking the sort of languages of the sciences, particularly biology, ecology, and the earth sciences,
Yeah.
geology in my work in
Mm.
particular, alongside the more literary, philosophical, mystical almost
Yeah.
uh, understandings of the world as well, or ways of navigating the world as well. And so
Yeah.
sometimes that can come about as a clash of different vernaculars,
Yeah.
but it's bigger than that as well. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to put some Silurian fossils into my poem. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm not just going to put some stratigraphy into my poem. It
Yeah.
needs to be kind of deliberately forged, I think.
Yeah.
And so another part of it is that you start to navigate place not just as a flaneur and
Mm.
as a deep topographer or as a creative, but also as following the similar methods and processes of the ecologist, of the
Yeah.
geologist,
Yeah.
as well.
It's
And so
fascinating though.
there's method and process built underneath the use of language.
Mm.
Uh, but what I also think it enlivens, if you like, is this kind of revitalizing of place as well.
Yeah.
It works
Yeah. Definitely.
particularly well in kind of natural and green spaces,
Yes.
because you're leaning into the sciences a little bit.
Yeah.
But there's nothing to stop you leaning into the social sciences and or
No.
the human geography, if you like,
Yeah.
and doing
Definitely.
a kind of urban version of it as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the psychogeographers called that meeting that you mentioned uh, being in. They call it a particular sort of psychological state, being in alert reverie. They said, where
Alert
you're
reverie. Yes, I like
alert reverie. Where you're aware, but you're allowing you're aware, but you're also allowing your kind of instinctive side to operate as well
That's
in a
exactly it. I mean,
in
the
a
key one of the key figures in geopoetics was the Scottish writer Kenneth White,
yeah.
who died a couple of years ago, sadly, and I was very lucky to have a couple of conversations with him.
Mm.
Um, and uh, yeah, he was all about forensic isn't the right word because it lends itself a little bit too much towards the sciences, but it's
Mm.
a kind of like hyper forensic assessment of landscape, of any
Right.
landscape really, but particularly natural landscape. And so where the way in which you would go about doing that is you'd pay attention to as far down as you possibly can go, the roots of a landscape, which is its geology. And then a
Mm.
little bit up from that, it's flora and fauna and its ecology. And then a little bit up from that, it's culture and its social impacts and things like that. And then your own idiosyncratic
Mm.
visions and emotions and things as well. So you get this very, very caught up, layered, palimpsest
Yeah.
type of assessment of
Yeah.
landscape as well. And what Kenneth White called that, he said, like, when you if you put that kind of geopoetic lens over your practice, over your movements, over your walks or whatever,
Mm.
you he said you enter the enormous.
Ah,
Even in the
that's a great
smallest little
phrase.
thing, you enter the
Yeah.
enormous. And
Yeah.
by entering the enormous, he said that you gain, I love this phrase, you gain a topological presence.
Wow.
And I think there's something of the sublime, something of reverie
Yeah.
about that as well, as almost like a
Yeah.
fugue state
Yes.
you encompass as well.
Yeah.
Somewhere in between logic and instinct, somewhere in
Yeah.
between knowing what you're doing and not knowing what you're doing
Yeah.
as well. Um, And I mean, I think these sorts of ideas you can trace all the way back to Coleridge and Wordsworth and
Oh, of
their lyrical
course.
ballads,
Yeah.
and perhaps even earlier than that. I mean, what we're talking about fundamentally here is a sort of 21st century wayfinding
Yeah. Precisely.
as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. That's a,
So you're
in that.
learning to read the landscape in the same way that that sort of desert nomads could read the sand.
definitely. Yeah. And I think that's, that's something that as writers we try so hard, don't we, to sort of do thought experiments with our own writing process that that requires us not to just sit on in front of our screens or in front of our notebooks
Yeah,
and write. This is something that the we are if we're I suppose if we're committed creative writers, we are looking always for new ways of experimenting with notions that are overlooked.
yeah, I think
Um,
so. And I think that's I think that's true of creative writing generally, but it seems to be particularly true of place writing.
yeah,
I mean,
that's exactly
what
right.
kind of work would Helen Mort produce if
Yeah,
she wasn't a rock climber?
yeah,
I mean, her work, and you know, when you read somebody like Nan Shepherd,
mm,
you know, you're not just reading about somebody who's watched a documentary about the Cairngorm.
yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah,
you can smell the dust under her fingernails
yeah,
when
yeah.
you read her work. And the same with somebody like Robert McFarlane as
Well,
well.
and Liz
And
Berry
it's
as
like,
well.
yeah, and Liz Berry,
Liz
I think
Berry is
there's
exactly
something
the same.
about, I mean, I wrote an essay a few years ago about geopoetics, and I quipped in that. I know it's terribly pretentious of me to
To
quote my,
use the word quip.
yeah, and to use the word quip. But I said that you can't be an armchair geopoet.
Right.
And I would say the same thing about the creative
Yeah.
muscle generally, but particularly if you're a landscape creative or a place creative,
Mm.
uh, you've got to get out there, you've got to move. And there's something
Yeah.
about the combination of movement and place
Yeah, there is.
and
Yeah.
individual and the communal that all
Yeah.
kind of come together in a very strange
Yeah.
machinery.
Well, there is that sort of I'm not sure if it's a little bit hippie, but anyway, here it is.
I like things that are a little bit hippie. I'm
I think it's a little bit. It's this sort of sense that your brain is just one part, but your body's got brains all over it. So
yes,
when you're walking and when you're experiencing weather, um, cold, heat, whatever, or just experiencing the atmosphere of place. You're not just experiencing it in your head, you're experiencing it with every single part of your body. And that
absolutely.
doesn't that's not just about touching or how the concrete feels or the tarmac. It's much more complex than that. And there is this sort of sense that we've got brains in every bit of our body, and that what we're doing when we're walking and when we're experiencing a place is that we're kind of switching that on. We're recalibrating ourselves to be specifically honed into or tuned into something that we haven't experienced before in a place that we felt we knew so well.
Yes.
Um, that sort of epiphany, I suppose. It's almost like an epiphany of feeling.
It is.
That
Yeah, I mean, we're back to that topological presence, the
Yeah,
act of reverie, the
yeah,
sublime moment,
yeah, yeah,
entering the enormous. I think
yeah,
these are all roundabout ways of saying of getting up the mountain in a different way.
yeah. That's exactly
Um,
right. Yeah.
but yeah, and I think so much of what you've just said kind of links back to that the earlier points that you made about psychogeography and
Mm,
going into the familiar with unfamiliar lenses,
yeah,
and what we said about vertical travel or micro
yeah,
travel as well. It all
mm,
sort of links back to uh,
mm,
that idea as well. I mean,
definitely.
there's another really brilliant poet called Alison Hallett,
Yeah.
who I've had the good fortune of having a few conversations with and share poetry with over
Mm,
the years as well. Um, I mean, she's a she's a geopoet fundamentally,
mm,
I would say, but she is a serious geological poet.
right.
Well, so she's done really brilliant work in sort of writing residencies in Iceland and
Mhm.
being part of kind of geological labs and things like this.
Wow.
But she manages, I think, beautifully to temper that very scientific, earth science driven, accurate. We can weigh and measure this sort of
Mm.
thing with that more instinctive, emotive
Yeah.
response. But she doesn't do it in a kind of wishy-washy way, I think.
Mm.
There is something of the neurological about her.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'd go as far as perhaps to call it a kind of paraneurological or a
Oh, wow.
metaneurological. I,
Wow.
I'm spinning those
Yeah.
terms out at the top of my head. I haven't thought about this until I started speaking. But there is
Yeah.
a certain kind of meta neurological happening,
Mm.
I think.
Yeah.
One of the things that Alison Hallett said in the past is about stones and rock.
Right.
She's a writer of rocks and landscape and fossils and geology.
Yeah.
Uh, that when she touches a rock or when she's within a kind of environment that is full of kind of geological splendor, if you like, or wonder, that it sort of awakens the animal part of her,
Right.
stuff that's right way down near the brain stem,
Yeah.
um, and that produces thoughts that she wouldn't have thought of had she not been physically in touch with the rocks.
Yeah.
In a conversation I had with her not so long ago, she said, I was sat at my desk and I was doing some writing, and I had a rock, one of my favorite rocks from my collection, in my hand. And now I don't know if I'd have been able to have the thoughts that I was having if I
Mm.
wasn't holding the rock at the same time. And
Yeah.
again, this sounds like kind of hippie stuff to some
Mm.
extent, but if you acknowledge that our senses are connected to our nervous systems are connected to our brains, and our brains are then
Yeah.
communicative devices as much as they are receiving devices.
Yeah.
And that you add to that that rocks are made of the same stuff as our bodies,
Mm.
calcium and iron and magnesium and all of
Mm.
these carbon and whatnot. You
Mm.
know, there it it's not that difficult to imagine that there is some kind of gestural communication happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that sort of really does sum up this importance then of not overlooking this element of place. It's a small word, and it's so close to us that we don't see it anymore. We're
Mm.
in it,
Yes.
um, and our characters and our whatever we're writing about, they're in it as well. And I think there are lots of writers as well who've spoken about. I don't particularly like this phrase, I've got to say, but Mark Augay talked about non-places.
Ah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I don't like the phrase desperately, because I think it is a place, by the way. But nevertheless, what he was sort of getting at was that the places that are more transient places,
Yeah.
not beautiful, um, sort of man-made, human-made, multi-story car parks, motorways, yeah, petrol stations,
Yeah.
sort of Premier Inns, those kinds of places where you've got a lot of people moving through very, very quickly. Um, that they're entirely different to that kind of traditional sense of what is beautiful or indeed fascinating.
Yeah.
Um,
And there is, isn't there? I mean, that kind of budget hotel on the edge of a motorway in the
yeah,
service station. This is automatically the place that you use as a pit stop between
yeah.
proper
You
places
don't live there. Yeah, nobody lives
as
there.
well. And for me, that just my senses are automatically on high alert for
Yeah,
beauty isn't the right term here, but curious, the things
yeah,
that are curious, and sometimes just the idea that, okay, I'm in a hotel room that looks exactly like the other 400 hotel rooms
yeah,
that
yeah,
are here.
yeah,
Everybody's just staying one night.
yeah, yeah.
You know,
I'll be gone
yeah.
tomorrow. It's almost like a little life,
Single
isn't it?
serving of everything.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't have to think about anything. I just have to sleep here. And there is something about those kinds of places as well. Places where people don't, well, they live for a very short period of time. They stay, but they
Mm.
still live. Rather than this place that you might call home. I'm sort of that kind of thing can definitely, and yet can definitely sort of provide and add to that compost that you've got. There are lots of writers who have written about, um, a petrol station in the middle of nowhere. There's a really great film called Shell, which is about a young woman and her father who live in one of those weird petrol stations in the Highlands of Scotland.
Yes, I remember you mentioning this
It's
film.
a brilliant film, but the actual sense of setting and place is the most important aspect of that story. The fact that they are on this kind of windy road where cars come so rarely, and they have to live this life, and they do. um, and although the landscape around it you might perceive to be containing, or you could kind of see it, that, oh yeah, that's beautiful, it's grim. There are all sorts of these kind of underlying senses about what's really going on in that place. And so I think it's when it comes to writing place, or when it comes to placiality, um, I myself have found it both inspiring and endlessly fascinating. It isn't something that stops being fascinating for me, or stops being probably the most important part of when I think about writing, or when I think about writing anything. Place is the first thing that springs up.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm always very keen to teach it and to see how it comes. For me, the fascinating part is watching other people reach this kind of epiphany of
Well,
interest.
yeah, same. And I mean, we've run workshops through Ripplebed Press and
Yeah,
various things over the years together, uh, including with our undergrads and our postgrads.
yeah,
But I think one of the things that I really enjoy about those workshops that we've run is, you know, we might, we could give 15 people, say, for example, exactly the same writing prompt
yeah,
around a particular place, or, using a particular material or photograph or whatever. And the even though the locality is exactly the same in each piece, it goes off in all sorts of ways,
yeah.
either in kind of form or genre or mood or
Mm.
content. And I think that's illustrative of what you've just said as well, that, that this is a kind of endlessly layered
Yeah, yeah,
thing. Which again, back to our earlier thoughts, which is why it's so fun, why it
yeah,
produces such a high creative yield as
yeah, yeah. Definitely, definitely. And the other thing it can do from the point of view, so I suppose going back to our subject last time about whether or not you can teach creative writing or not.
well.
The thing about teaching place or writing about places, it requires you to actually get up and go out. It requires a sort of active sense of creativity, of sort of firing up your creativity, and then letting that creativity somehow burn off later on. So it's not just about sitting at a desk and looking
Waiting
at
for the
pictures
muse.
or waiting for the muse. You'll be waiting a long time. So it is about this kind of way of encouraging people to think differently through using active means, think differently about their creativity that way.
Yeah,
So yeah, yeah.
I
And
think
yeah, and I
absolutely.
mean we've already mentioned the lovely Liz Berry, who, I is, you know, emblematic of Black Country writing, isn't she? And
Absolutely.
place
Yep.
writing. She's she like me, although she's way differently, but it has this sort of fascination with the canal network, which of course is something that is part and parcel of the Black Country that we all love so much. And I have written, and I think when we talk about geopoetics, and you talk about that sense of not forensic but kind of deep thinking about it, for me, that it's the canals that have been the obsession. I don't know if there's a particular obsession that you have had. Well, fossils have been your
Yeah,
thing,
well, I
haven't
mean,
they?
yeah, certainly the geopark around the Black Country, because but for very similar reasons, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
I I love the canals as well, uh, but I particularly like the the sites across the UNESCO Black Country Geopark. So for
Mm.
those that are listening, you're going to want to check that out and go and visit those places because they're amazing.
Definitely are.
But I think
Yeah.
I'd be interested to hear why you like the canal network so much because
Mm.
I'm my gut says that we like these locations for similar reasons. I really love the geopark, places like Wren's Nest, Salt
Mm.
Wells, Sedgley
Yeah.
Beacon, Cotwell End, these kind of
Yeah.
places. Because on one hand, they are this deep, you know, uh, profoundly wonderful areas of geological significance.
Mm.
So you can get right down into the deep time of a particular place and the slow time of a particular place. And you can
Mm.
touch it and feel it and go fossil hunting and
Mm.
find the layers in between different time zones of rock right there quite quite easily as well.
Mm.
But and then on top of that, you've then got or connected to it in some weird way, you've got these landscapes that are also nature reserves with protected species of dragonfly and newt
Yeah.
and wild
Yeah.
grass and these sorts of things.
Yeah.
They're lush natural vistas as well. But they also, at least in the main, tend to be ex-industrial sites as well. So they're
Yeah.
the old quarries, old mine shafts, old railway lines, these sorts of things.
Yeah.
And you can
Yeah.
still find the relics of industry there
Mm.
as well. In fact,
Definitely. Yeah.
most of the kind of beautiful nature has been grown on top of spoil heaps
Yes.
from old
Yeah.
mines or where they've decided that hill's in the wrong place, we need to move it over to there,
That's exactly it. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Um, and then at the same time as that, these are little spots of landscape that sit either right down the edge of a industrial estate or you've got to cut through a housing estate to get through
Yeah.
them. And so you
Yeah.
kind of wander through Dudley and you're going through a housing estate in Dudley and you just kind of hop over a fence and suddenly you're in this deep time,
Mm.
post-industrial, lush, natural realm.
Yeah.
You're not in Dudley anymore. You're somewhere else entirely.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that combination of beauty, of the natural, of kind of being simultaneously interconnected and totally irrelevant all at the
Mm.
same time. That
Mm.
it's also a place of kind of family picnics and bike rides, but
Yeah.
also of drug
Yeah.
taking and nefarious activities and
Yeah.
gangs and these sorts of things.
Yeah.
That you can go anywhere you want with that sort of place in a
Yeah.
creative way. There's that weird fusion of the homely and the unhomely, the familiar and
Definitely.
the unfamiliar,
Yeah.
the attractive and the repulsive, all at
Mm.
the same time. And I get a very similar experience when I'm walking the cut as well. These are
That's
kind of
exactly.
homely,
Yeah.
nice, pleasant,
Yeah.
but also dangerous.
Yes. I love I totally agree with everything you've said. And I think that sort of combination of the man-made against
Yeah.
nature,
But the
um,
organic and the, yeah,
that sort of that and that sense that within this sense of potential peril also, there is a sort of a sense that anything could happen and anything has happened. Um, it provides a kind of a real atmosphere of course, but also a sort of an attitude towards it. When I'm walking down, people will say to me, "Oh, you don't go walking down you don't go walking down the towpath, do you?" Yes, of course, I do. And but I'm on a different kind of level of
Yeah,
alertness
there's
about
almost
what's
like
going
that
on.
sympathetic nervous system is
There
starting to kick
is,
in a little bit,
yeah,
which is actually
yeah.
very good for you creatively.
Very good. And because the towpath is so narrow, when you do meet people, you have to pass by them very
Mm.
carefully. And you'll notice that people will go, they'll speak to you. Even young people who don't tend to have conversations will nod in, no, I'm safe, everything's safe, you're safe, I can see that you're fine.
Yeah,
And I absolutely love that. And I love the fact that people live on the canal. I love the kind of idea of narrowboats now as being places to live, as opposed to in the historical version of them, where of course people lived on, but they also kind of, it was a place of in industrial movement, and it was part of the industrial landscape. I love all that, and I think there is this sort of almost Dickensian low leaden lineness of it,
yes,
that sort of comes that makes me that gives it this sort of brood, and it also gives it a border in a place that is borderless, as we've often spoken about this kind of thing. And I just think that there are important parts of the history of the place, which links as well to everything that you've said about the geoparks.
mm,
This is the past. You're actually in the past when you're
yeah, you
there.
are, and
Um,
the violence of that past as well
yeah,
sometimes. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, and this sense of the ghosts of people who've worked in the factories that line the
yeah,
canal. And it never fails. It never fails to um, loosen up sort of ideas,
yeah.
or
Energize is the word I like.
yeah, it
It's almost
definitely
like I'm
does.
refilling my battery, but it
Yeah,
refilling my battery in a really peculiar thing. I mean, like
yeah,
I've got the canal just down the road from me where we live.
mm,
You know, if I was to walk an hour, let's say,
mm,
I would take in a nature reserve, an old
mm.
glassworks, an actual steel factory,
Yeah,
canal locks, geese,
yeah,
moorhens, swans, graffiti, litter,
yeah, yeah,
people smoking dope, people
yeah.
drinking,
People
at
living
11
on a
o'clock in
boat,
the
on a boat.
morning,
Yeah, yeah,
um, barbed wire, concrete, and then once I'm sort of 40 minutes into my walk, I'm in proper countryside then.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
I've gone kind of through this domestic, industrial, post-industrial,
yeah,
natural realm, and then very, very short space of time, I'm in kind of proper countryside, if you like.
yeah, yeah. You're
And I
only kind of
find that
walking
about
through.
this region in particular very, very exciting and
It is
beautiful.
evocative, and you're walking through history as well as geography and geology, and time. It's the whole. You've got the whole thing going on there, and I'm grateful for the canals still being
Yeah,
there, for the
same.
canals ever having been built, really, that has provided this sort of sense that um, we've got that and we've got it to hand. So yeah, that's my obsession and
Excellent.
fascination.
Cool. Well, I mean, I think that kind of brings us quite nicely to a close.
Yeah.
Maybe just before we do that, um, because I think listeners to this will have had lots to kind of make notes on, or that, oh,
Mm.
I've never heard of that term before. I'll go and check that out. Maybe a nice way to close would be to recommend either your favorite or somebody you're reading at the moment that does place, not necessarily Black Country, but does
Okay.
place so brilliantly that you you
Right.
you you want to champion.
Um, well, I have recently read, strangely enough, I've never read any of her work before. I've read Anne Patchett's
Okay.
latest novel. I had it as an advanced copy, and it's called Whistler, and it's set really in areas of New York. This is sort of similar kind of New York is a very popular setting for a lot of writers, not least of which was Paul Auster, who sadly died, I think, late last year, who set his work very firmly in New York. But Anne Patchett has got a very kind of um, because I hate to say it, but there is a sort of there's a male sense of writing which I think Paul Auster had, and she's got a much more kind of natural aspect to the way she writes. She focuses more on the park, Central Park, and that kind of element of is going on there, rather than the buildings and 4th Street, 5th Street, and the kind of
Mm.
geography of it. So she sort of uses the kind of bustle of the city in a much more gentle sort of way, which I found really fascinating. So that I don't think that's to be published until later this
Gentle
month.
side of New York, eh?
The gentle
Excellent.
side of New York. Yeah, yeah. How about you?
Beautiful. Well, I'm going to take us to the States as well with mine.
Okay.
My recommendation is a poetry collection called Call Out Coyote or Call
Yeah.
Out Coyote,
Got it here.
depending on
Yeah.
where you're from. But I think the
Yeah.
author like Coyote
Oh,
rather
okay.
than Coyote,
Yeah.
by Seth Wick.
Yeah, got it. You gave
Absolutely
to me.
beautiful collection of poetry
Mm,
that's got a sort of mythological quality to it. Certainly got a kind of folkloric and
mm,
Christian mystical quality to it. But these beautiful and dark and mysterious portrayals of and expressions, and I would say explorations of uh, the landscape, the flora, the fauna, the critters
mm.
and the agricultural culture, if you like, as well, and agricultural communities of the Texas Panhandle.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's
You
brilliant
gave me a
kind
copy
of
and I've got it. Yes, it's
cowboy
beautiful.
farmer poetry
It's
in
lovely.
some sense, but there's a
Yeah.
real lyrical beauty to his work
Yeah.
as
Real
well.
sense of rhythm and
Yeah.
really gorgeous stuff. Beautiful. Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, fill
Right.
your
Well,
boots,
next time we get
everybody.
together, Kerry, I think we're
Yeah.
going to talk about the idea that everybody can make a novel, can't they? And everybody can
Oh,
write.
that old. Yeah. Everyone's got a novel in them.
And we might join that together perhaps with if everybody can write a novel, can't they? With
Huh.
the idea that, well, actually, everybody can now that the machines are here with us.
Yeah.
So join us
Yeah.
next time where we tackle those two fraught
Brilliant.
and heady topics.
Great. Look forward to that.
Creative and professional writing at the University of Wolverhampton and Ripplebed Press bids you adieu.
Bye.